Hi, I'm Caitlin and I'm here in conversation with Bryony Marks, the amazing Bryony Marks. And nice to see you, Bryony, across the Zoom waves.
So nice to be seeing Caitlin, and I'm here with you, and you're just as amazing. I'm so excited that we get a chance to talk. I'm in lockdown again, lockdown 4, Mark 4, and I never get to talk with you anyway, let alone, in current COVID times. So this is a real treat. It really is.
I know, I feel like we only ever see each other like in dark, noisy award ceremonies, and that's about
We
it.
do.
And we have
We
this
do.
kind of quick yelling conversation at each other, and then we hurry away back to our own cities.
So true.
So, how is everything going for you? You've just finished a job, have you? Just finished a series?
I've just finished. I just finished Everything's Gonna Be Okay, with second series, which is Josh Thomas's show in America. And I had 2 weeks off, and now I've started the second series of Frayed, which is for ABC and Sky. And I know that you have been working on New Gold Mountain. Is it finished yet?
Yeah, I finished New Gold Mountain. Well, I kind of did the last reconform of one of the other versions. You know how you do multiple versions of shows. And I sent that off yesterday. So it's pretty much finished.
Oh,
Yes.
wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, you too.
So am I allowed to ask what it was scored for?
Okay, great question, Bryony.
I'm jumping straight in. I'm going straight into tell me about your work. What's happened? What happened yesterday? Tell me.
All right, so just a little backdrop. New Gold Mountain is a 4-part series for Gold Post, directed by Corrie Chen, produced by Kylie Dufresne or Fresnay. Do you know how to say her last name? Is it Fresnay?
Oh, gosh. Well, I say Fresnay, but that doesn't mean it's right.
I know. Well, Kylie, if you're listening, text me and tell me how to say it properly, please, or give me a call.
Sorry, Kylie. Hope I said it right.
Anyway, so it's a revisionist Western set in 1857 in Ballarat, and it's gold mining days from a Chinese perspective. So when Kylie called me up about this job, I basically jumped at it, being half Chinese, and actually that's a whole thing I've learnt on the side, that I shouldn't call myself half Chinese anymore. I am Chinese, I'm Australian, and it's, I'm not half anything, and it's been really great for me to accept my own culture just working on this show. But so I wrote it for a small string ensemble, percussion, 2 Chinese instruments, the pipa and the guqing, and finally the big percussion instrument of the whole show is the gold pan. So that was really fun. I think I've got it here.
Oh,
beautiful. Yeah. So I emailed Kylie and said, when you're on set, can you bring me back a gold pan? They're like, what do you want one of those for? And I went, I think it's going to be the lead percussion instrument in the series. And here it is. Look at this thing. It's a beauty.
Beautiful. That is such a good idea. That's a brilliant. I remember going to Sovereign Hill, which is, I think, where they shot New Gold Mountain, isn't it? Yeah. So we go in Victoria, you go in about grade 4 or grade 5. And I remember panning for gold with one of those, and I remember the sound. I mean, did you use any water in the sound?
Put water in it. It's amazing with water in it.
Sand or, gold? Do you use gold?
Oh, yes, that was in the budget, Bryony. Only using gold in the gold pan. I'm sorry I'm not using anything less. That's hilarious.
So what else? So sand? Water?
I didn't end up using any, we tried putting pebbles and sand in it, but actually it was better being played as if it was a percussion instrument rather than as if I was mining for gold.
Yeah, okay.
So we bowed it and we hit it with various mallets and played with our fingers. And I brought Ben Walsh in, who's a great percussionist, and he's very well known for playing crazy, weird and wonderful instruments. And he's played on a lot of my scores in the past, actually. He played on Getting Frank Gehry, and he played on Bomb Harvest, and I always bring him, and he played on Woman with an Editing Bench, and I want to make a film about women. So I always bring him in and just give him some weird thing and say, can you play this? Rather than, asking him to play a drum kit, for example.
Fantastic, yeah. Did he love it? Did he love that instrument?
I do love the gold pan. It probably will never go in anything else ever again. I mean, that is really idiosyncratic for me to that series, and it has a very distinct resonance to it. But it's a fun thing to listen out for when you watch the show. It's kind of like an audio signature nearly of the show, which is interesting. And what's interesting about it is that it's the one instrument that everybody plays in the show. Like, the whole show is about a clash of cultures, a clash of races, right? And so this is the one thing that everyone uses. It's the one unifying kind of instrument, because they're all panning for gold. They all want gold. So yeah.
That's so clever. And does it? I am gonna leave this, I promise. But did it have a pitch?
It did. It was somewhere between F and F sharp.
Yeah, right.
Somewhere between that.
Did you tune your strings to it?
No.
You had the dissonance.
Yeah, but look, when you hear the show, you realise I got really into microtones, even for the string players. So
yeah, did they love you? The string players loved you for that?
Oh, well, look, I've worked with them many, many times, and actually they nailed it.
Yeah.
It really, really nailed it. I just had to kind of tell them how wide I wanted the bends to go. And I often found that writing for them, as long as I keep one or two steady in the middle, everyone else can kind of bend around them, and they have an anchor to come back to.
Beautiful. Do you know who's amazing at microtonal string playing? My 12-year-old son.
Really?
Yes, I'm talking about being out of tune. Amazing at microtones, not necessarily so good at scales, and anyway, no.
What, does he play violin?
Just joking. Yes, he's learning violin. We've just had anyway, we don't need to go into that in depth, but yes, lots of microtones.
I don't even know, but are you a violinist?
No, I am not. No, I tried violin in grade 3 for a year, and at school. And if you must know, Caitlin, I was a very uncoordinated child, which just threw me, further into the arms of music, because I loved music. I was terrible at sports, so it was all music. But with violin, so I was so uncoordinated that I broke my arm 5 times between the age of 3 and about 12.
I was accident prone too, Bryony.
Well, you were?
Yes, and I broke my arm as well.
There you go. So in grade 3, that was sort of around peak arm breaking time for me. So holding my arm up to play violin, I was just like, I'm just not strong enough to do it. So no, and I don't play any string instrument, and it's such a bummer as a composer not to play a string instrument. You just feel, and that's why I'm actually, in all seriousness, loving Ben, my son, learning a string instrument, because I sit in on his lessons, and even though I've written for strings, like you, for a really, really long time, I'm learning stuff all the time from his rudimentary string lessons. I cannot believe how difficult it is to learn how to play the violin. He's got quite a good ear, but microtones aside. But he had a whole lesson on where to hold his elbow. It's just such a difficult instrument, so difficult. So I play piano, like a lot of composers. Do you play piano?
Yeah, I play piano. It's a good instrument because, it's good for kind of the geography. You've got all 88 keys there. So I find it's a handy instrument as a composer.
Shorthand for harmony. Yeah,
exactly. And I also play flute.
Yes.
And accordion.
Might have known that. Yes, I did know you played accordion. Very nice.
Yeah, so I played a lot of flutes in New Gold Mountain. My dad brought me all these bamboo flutes back from China, so I used a lot of those in the show, which was fantastic. But one thing we did do with the show is we used the Chinese instruments for the Western characters and the Western instruments for the Chinese characters. And that was remarkably effective to create a sense of antagonism to each other, but also it unified them because they're all in the same town. And weirdly, what I find really weird is that if I played like a low Irish whistle for the Chinese character, immediately your head goes, that's a Chinese dizzy or ditzy. It's not like you immediately try and figure out what Chinese instrument that is, just because it's simply paired with a Chinese person. So it's quite a interesting thing and fun thing to do.
That's a fabulous idea. So was that your idea in tandem with Corrie?
Yeah, well, Corrie's it's all about Corrie. She's a very clever director.
She's clever. I know Corrie, and she's super clever.
Yeah. Have you worked with Corrie before?
I have, but not, I worked with her on a show called Mustangs.
And so how did everything go for you with I'm going to keep wanting to call it Please Like Me.
Oh, yeah, that was Josh's first series.
Yes, which I watched and loved.
Yeah, me too. I love it. It's so much fun. It's a glorious show to work on. I work pretty much exclusively with Josh, although, funnily enough, so first series I was here, everyone else in America. Second series, they're in America, Josh is in America for half of it and then came back here. But everyone's in their homes except the mixer. So the mixer's in the sort of palatial mixing studio by himself with his mask on, alone. And then the sort of, the music editor and the music supervisor and the editor and all the other people, producer, everyone's isolated. So all of a sudden I was, I could have been down the road from them. So whereas I didn't go in the first season, I didn't go to America, so I didn't go to mixers. This time I did go to mixers from this room. So I did work with more people. But basically it's pretty much just Josh briefing me. We have worked together an awful lot now for 4 seasons of Please Like Me, and this is the second of this show, and he just has this immense ability to play, and he just lets me play, and it's just joy because it's quite uncommon. He's just not. Also, when we go to a second series, it's really normal, as everyone, as you know, and anyone watching this would know, to base your music on the first series music, and you always extend it, but you might use quite a few cues from the first series and it gets a shorthand. Josh, I guess he gets bored quite quickly, so there'll be something in that I'll think, oh, that worked quite nicely, from season 1. You go, oh, it's so boring. Let's do something new. So you're never resting on your laurels. You're always creating, and because his brain's a bit sort of, let's try this. You get to just play like a little kid, and that's been working with him the whole way through. And I think, it's just so fun. Really, what we do is not brain surgery. We're not epidemiologists. We're not curing cancer, and it should really be fun, even when it's working on something very dark. Fun's not the right word, but a sense of play and experimentation and sort of just sort of doing, that just the flow of it. So I love working with him. I love it.
Yeah, well, his shows are fun to watch. So I think even the subject matter, it's always like a joy. Like they're very bingeable and they're very, fun characters, and you always got a bit of a smile on your face when you're watching his shows. Well, I do. So even if there's drama and there's sadness, it's somehow, we don't want to use the word whimsical, but it's definitely, fun to watch. So that's a really nice thing to do. That's great. How long have you guys been working together, you and Josh? That sounds like a very long relationship.
He was so young when we started. I can't exactly remember. It's just since the first season of Please Like Me, whenever that was. I think he was about 24, and I think he's about 35-ish now. So that long. He might be just had a birthday somewhere around that age. He might have turned 36 or 35. Yeah, so about a decade. Quite a long time in a way.
And that, I didn't realise that show was so big overseas.
Please Like Me, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it was huge. It had a sort of a cult following internationally, yeah. And then Everything's Going to Be Okay follows one of the character's sisters in the show is on the autism spectrum. So again, he's sort of, and is played by an actor who is herself on the spectrum, which apparently is relatively new thing. You know, often a person with autism might be played by a neurotypical person. So I think that it's won a lot of plaudits from the autistic community for that.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So tell me, like, what got you into screen composition? Where did this all come from? Did you?
I'd much prefer to hear you answer that. I I will answer it. I always played music. You know, I was shit at sport, so I loved music forever since I started playing piano at 5. I didn't realise. I'll be very interested to hear your take on this. It took me a long time to realise it was something I could do as an adult. It was just so part of my everyday life as a child. You know, I was did a lot of music at school, a lot of house music, and just, you know, was in bands with friends, and it was just everywhere. So when I left school, I sort of thought, well, I have to go and do something different because that's part of my childhood. So I went and did a honours arts degree in art and English, which I loved. I absolutely loved, and I actually think informs what I do now in all sorts of good ways, critical thinking and all sorts of good ways. And then when I was when I left uni, I went and worked at a gallery called Heidi in Melbourne, beautiful gallery. And I worked there for 2 years full-time. It's the only full-time job I've ever had. And in that period, I learned very, very quickly that I didn't want to be administering to creative people. I wanted to be one of them. They were having more fun than me making their art. So I worked that out by the time I was about 21, sort of learnt my craft and went back to uni, and yeah, until I was 31. And that's how. So I did a little stage play for some actor mates when I was 21. It was solo piano, which I played on the side of the stage, and it was just the sort of stuff I'd done all my life, and people liked it, and I was like, oh, they liked that. You know, it was super low scale, but maybe I can do, like, this is actually my favourite thing. Maybe I'm allowed to do this. What about you?
Well, it's interesting that you're talking about community theatre. I definitely did a stint in community theatre, playing on the side of a stage for, you know, a play, playing the piano. So that's pretty hilarious. It must be a rite of passage. Or back then it might have been a rite of passage, because it was kind of more, I think I entered into screen composition just around the time where there was a crossover between the analogue era to the digital era. And what I mean by that is, I sort of spent my youth doing a lot of music. It was music at high school, you know, Amy B grades and stuff like that on piano and flute. And then I went and thought, there's no way I can do music for a living, just like you. So I did a science degree. And after a year of this science degree, I went, oh my gosh, this maths is so hard. I'm just going to jump over to a music degree. That's going to be much easier. But I still didn't think I could do it for a living, but I just thought I have to do something that I love. And then I sort of came out of that and just taught piano for a long time.
So did you do a music degree on piano?
No, like it was an arts degree with a major in music. And so my major was around composition, and in particular I was very interested and did a lot of 20th century composition and ethnomusicology. That was the big one for me, and specifically spent a lot of time playing in Indonesian gamelans. And yeah, and so then I came out of uni and just began teaching piano for a living and just playing in bands and touring up and down the coast.
What sort of music?
Like post-rock, weird, wonderful. Imagine Jethro Tull meets like a punk band meets, awesome. I don't know, a folk band.
So, I love it.
Oh, it was a crazy band.
I love it.
Actually, I met Michael Lira back then. We played gigs together often, and Nick Wales and a few others, and that's when I met Ben Walsh and things like that. Yeah, and and did a lot of little theatre bits and pieces and stuff like that. And my brother then went to AFTRS. He went to film school to study animation, and he made a short film called The Mozzie, and he needed someone to write the music. So he said, can you write the music for me? I didn't know how to write music on a computer at the time. I only knew how to write it using pencil and paper. So I only knew how to score, like, you know, on actual manuscript. So I got out my metronome and just timed the scene with my metronome and just kind of marked it out on the page using pencil and paper because I didn't know how else to do it. And then I called up Michael Lira and Nick Wales, my friends at the time, and said, can you come and play on this score for me for my brother's short film? So we went into afters and we recorded to picture, literally. And and I kind of played one of the instruments and sort of conducted at the same time. And that really gave me, I just got a bug for it straight away. And then about 3 years later, I tried out to go to afters to do screen composition myself and got in. So that's kind of how I got into it, which was, yeah. And I remember my first thing was I was like, can someone show me how to turn on the computer? What does bounce to disk mean?
Oh, yeah. I was were you all right with it? I was a technophobe when I started. Or how were you? Were you happy with it, with gear?
Yeah, well, I'm still on the same DAW that I was taught at film school. So I don't think I'll be changing from DP. What do you use, Bryony?
I use Logic. Yeah, and I have changed radical. I did used to use Cubase.
Oh, you went away from Cubase.
At school, see, this is a slightly different topic, but at school we used, for scoring, we used Finale. And I've forgotten how to use that now. Because so now when I do chamber pieces, which I did pretty much exclusively last year when we, didn't have any work during lockdown, I had to score them all using Logic scoring, which is not built for it, Caitlin. It's not built for it.
It's not. I saw your Facebook post and my heart went out to you.
Yeah, I got there, but I can't remember how to use. I always think when I've got a break, I'll reteach myself how to use it all, but I'm just busy. Yeah,
I still use Finale, but I try and if I can, I try to get an orchestrator in to do my scores for me because it just takes too much time when you've got to be writing and doing so many other things.
I do for film or TV. If I have the budget, I absolutely do use the copyist. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, but not on lockdown chamber music, Caitlin. No budget there. Yeah. So tell me because I think people want to know this stuff, and I'm sure you've answered this question a lot before. I certainly have. When did you get your first paid gig and how did it come about, Caitlin?
Oh, that's a really good question. My first paid gig was pretty much nearly straight out of film school, and it came about probably because of nepotism. So obviously I got into film school because I got my first unpaid gig through my brother doing his, and that I used that to try out for film school. And then straight out of film school, my brother obviously had finished film school and he'd been working as an animator in the industry, and he got this little job for a documentary called Children of Tibet where he had to just do the animated maps in this doco. And the director, Min Wern, said, oh, didn't your sister just come out of film school? Why don't we use her to do the score? So that was my first paid gig, and it was just like a couple of grand or something. It was a very small fee for a doco, but I thought it was massive at the time. And I actually didn't keep any of the fee at all. I sunk the whole fee back into recording live musicians and paying for a mixer to do.
It's a big psychological thing, I think, getting your first paid gig. Like you were lucky to get it early on because you didn't have to have a crisis about whether, like, you're like, right, this is viable and off we go. So that was fabulous. I know, a lot of people are sort of looking for the magic ingredients, because once you're working, the treadmill starts and you start working, and then you gain contacts and everything sort of snowballs. But before you're working professionally, that's that jump, which has a strong element of randomness, doesn't it, as to how it happens, and luck and hard work and perseverance and resilience and randomness and luck. And you can't really say to someone how to make that happen.
I will say, though, I mean, I was lucky that first gig, they just used an arts law contract. So the contract was fine, everything was easy. And it was a really great stepping stone into the industry. And the fact that my brother was on it too was kind of really nice. But I will say that I think it's a little bit different for people stepping out of film school or stepping out of like music school these days compared to when I did in 2003. I'm not sure when you stepped out, but I think back then there was just a lot less people learning screen composition. And it was still a very, I mean, I was only like the second or third year. I was the first year with Martin Armiger at AFTRS, but I think screen composition had only been, I think Cliff Bradley was the year before me or something. But screen composition had only been around for a couple of years at AFTRS. So you kind of stepped out. And back then AFTRS was this thing where everyone kind of looked at who was coming out of AFTRS. Who are these people? And they had these industry events, which they still do now. And I remember from that industry event where they played all the films, I had a number of people email me after it saying, I saw the films and I kept liking all the films that had your music on it. So it was an interesting thing that when I came out of film school, weirdly, everyone says that's where you make your contacts and you do get a lot of your gigs through the people you make films with. But weirdly, actually more of the films were from people who had heard my music from those short films that I'd made at film school rather than the people I'd worked with at film school.
Wow. That's really interesting. And that is something that I say to people wanting to work in this field is just work, just find a bunch of friends or, like-minded people in various different disciplines and just keep making work. And I mean, what you're saying pays testament to that. I think that if you can, yes, the AFTRS does give it a sort of imprimatur, but if you've got work to show and you keep working and putting stuff out, and of course now you can put things out in a way that you couldn't when we started, so there's more opportunity there in a way. So filmmaking is a verb and just keep doing it. I mean, I probably did 20 short films before I got paid properly, and some of them might have paid, $200 or something, but, before I actually started getting paid professionally.
And so what was your first paid gig then, Brian?
It was a TV series called We Can Be Heroes.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, it's a long time ago now. Yeah,
that's a great first gig.
Yes, it was quite high profile, and I did. It took me a long time. It took me from 21 deciding I really wanted to do it, and then I was 33 and pregnant with my first child when that happened. So it took a long time, but then once it happened, I've worked solidly ever since. Kind of haven't stopped except for good old 2020. So I have another question for you. Do you always use live musicians in your scores, or sometimes do you do completely electronic scores? Do you mix it up?
Look, I want to say I always use live musicians, but there's not always the budget for it, so I do mix it up. And there's a show out at the moment called Playing with Sharks. It's the Valerie Taylor story. It's a feature film. And that was really a COVID baby. And normally I do like to use some live musicians, but that was we will make that right at the beginning of lockdown. So the whole thing is just like basically fake orchestra, and I hired a guitarist.
So do you have the skills to make a fake orchestra sound like a real one? Is that in your skill set, or do you subcontract that?
No, I did it myself, and I wouldn't say, look, everyone says it sounds great. I would beg to differ. It's still, how when you get to the end of a job, all you hear is the things you would love to change. And everyone's like, this music's amazing. And you're like, thanks.
I think you probably feel like that more if you have done it all yourself like that. So, if you are in a position, which obviously I know you are all the time, when you can use musicians, then I don't think you get that awful feeling because they bring something else and it's all fresh and new in their interpretation. So then you get all titillated by that and send it off thinking that, you know, it's brilliant. Whereas, yes, if you work something yourself over and over and over, of course you're going to be critical of it.
Yeah. I will say that I'm pretty good at finessing MIDI to make it sound pretty good, only because, you know, that's how you get a cue over the line, isn't it really?
Yeah, I mean, I do obviously MIDI drafts of everything, like everyone does. They don't, yes, of course I put effort into them sounding good enough to get across the line, of course, not an idiot, but they don't really sound like they're going to sound. They just sort of sound good enough in themselves, because I am replacing, unless there are a couple of things I don't replace, but yeah, the majority of stuff I will replace. So it's a pretty big jump up, which kind of works in my favour in that if they think it sounds okay at my MIDI draft level, they're probably going to be pretty happy when it sounds beautiful because real musicians have played it. Yeah, but I'm certainly not an expert in I wouldn't know, I don't have the right sound cards and stuff to make beautiful orchestral arrangements. I do really ugly ones, and I use you'll be absolutely horrified by this, I use the sounds in the box, the Logic sounds to do it. I don't have any plugins to do it.
Wow.
That's just to get approval for stuff. Yeah, not to ever use that because it all gets replaced.
So you don't have lots of virtual instruments, is that what you're saying?
No, none. I used to have VST.
God, that's so radical.
None.
That's like punk, man. You're like a punk MIDI arranger.
Sometimes so with someone like Josh, seeing as we were talking about Josh, so when he started, he'd never worked in our medium before. You know, he's a stand-up comedian who'd been on a show, but a different sort of, like talking about your generation. So I think it was not a talk show, a game show really. So never been involved in creating a narrative or anything like that. And so, I mean, I just play him sketches all with piano and say that's going to be full band, that's going to be an opera singer, that bit's going to be a trumpet.
That's super old school.
Yes,
that's
super
like what
old school.
You know, Williams did with Spielberg. And
right, it's just like that. There are no differences. Yeah. Sorry, go on. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. But then I do, of course, lay stuff up, but I'm only using Logic sounds. I don't use anything else.
Well, I think I'm a little bit the opposite. I have too many virtual instruments.
Right.
Like literally crazy numbers. It's probably too many.
Right. Do you? But you must have favourite sounds within them that you like, go-to sounds.
Yeah. But I do try and look. I think there is. I mean, unfortunately, I can't take my fingerprint out of the music that I make. Even though I consistently try to reinvent myself, I always try and make myself do different things every time. But there's always something that's inherently got my fingerprint on it that just.
But you say that like it's a bad thing. That's a good thing. So there's two. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say it's a good thing. That's a bit of a value judgment. I personally think it's a good thing, but that doesn't mean everyone else should do it. Because don't you reckon there's sort of two sorts of screen composers? There's someone who can do anything, like incredibly versatile. So give them this, and then there's someone who has a signature sound. So I'm more interested in the latter, but I applaud the former. I mean, when people can do that, it's like hats off, amazing. I don't think I'm like that at all. But when I started, I had a very, very, very narrow range in what I felt confident in doing. So, and that was, I can even tell you exactly what it was. It was a certain sort of indie film where you don't overplay the music. So it's very subtle. The sort of film that has a lot of time with no music. You know, those sparse, really subtle, sort of probably 90s indie scores. They were the sort I felt I could do. And then and I still love that. I love stuff that doesn't have too much music, which is not Josh's stuff. Josh's stuff has way too much music. I tell him that all the time. It's just wallpapered with music. when I did Cloud Street, I remember Matt, the director, who is my husband, saying to me, now, we've always been a bit ironic and we don't want to, overplay things and we don't want to be too over emotional. And he's like, now is not the time for that. Now this is Cloud Street. We have to go there. And that was kind of like a dam bursting, because we did do big, big things like with orchestra and the way that he created the miniseries. And then I kind of went, oh, maybe I can do different sorts of things to what I thought. And then as I went, I just wanted, like, what draws me to a project is whether I think it's good or not. And it might be good, hilarious. It might be good, dark. It's not really defined by any style or genre. It's more, is there something in it that draws me in? And then I'm really keen to try different musical styles, just to keep it, mixing it up. But I think I've been listening to your music, and I think you do that more than you think. That's what I think. Yeah.
I think that definitely different directors pull out different sides of my compositional style, and I have different, and maybe you have the same with Josh versus other directors. I have certain things that I do for, say, Sally Aitken compared to what I might have done with Creve versus what I've done with Kim Mordaunt, and with probably what I do with Corrie. Like, Corrie just loves high drama, so we just did a high drama through the whole thing, and she's like, yeah, man, that's balls to the wall drama. So it's like everyone has this different thing that, brings something different out of me. So yes, I definitely think
that's so fun.
It is so fun. And I think what's really great and what I love the most is when someone hires me to do a job, not because they want me to do what I do, but they are interested in to see what I will bring to that job, and that what that job needs has not been defined yet, and it's a discovery process together to find out what is the idiosyncratic sound, what is the sound of this show, and I love that discovery process. And sometimes I find if the temp is really like crazy, like it's just some amazing composer that's just so far off anything I've done before, people are like, are you okay with that? I'm like, yes, this is a challenge, because for me, the biggest and best thing I love about this job is kind of the musical puzzle solving nature of it. That's what really, when I crack a puzzle, like when I feel like I fit a piece of music poetically, but also kind of beautifully and cleanly to a scene, and the shapes of the phrases feel natural, yet it punches in all the moments within the scene. That's when I feel like I've solved the puzzle really well. And what's interesting is that most puzzles have one solution, but with screen composition, there's an infinite number of solutions, and no solution is completely right nor wrong, but when it feels right. So it's an interesting, weird place to be, but I do love the puzzle solving nature of it.
Me too. I know exactly what you mean. It's really one of the things that makes this particular discipline so interesting, I think. And it is, and you do know, don't you? You do know when it works, and it's to do with rhythm and space and, all sorts of different technical things. But it's a lot more than the technical things.
And it's to do with the edit as well. Like, obviously we love a great editor where the rhythm is really beautifully in the scene, and, and you can really play with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
In talking about like musical fingerprints and solving puzzles, it's probably nice to show one of my clips, I guess, from the opening of Danger Close, the Battle of Long Tan. And this is just an extended promo, but it's a big, long piece that exists at the front of the film. If we watched the film, you'd see that there's like a minute and a half or 2 minutes or something of investor cards at the beginning. And this has been recut without those investor cards. But the whole lullaby at the beginning of this piece actually went over the investor cards. And one of the biggest puzzles about this piece was how we were going to get across this whole massive 3.5, 4 minute scene where half of it was investor cards and then it was just this big overture at the front of the film, and it needed to sort of ramp up from nothing. And at the very beginning I said to Creve, I think that this is actually a blessing that we've got these investor cards, because everyone's going to start in the dark and not know where they are. So how about we sing them a lullaby from the mums of these soldiers, and we can really kind of disarm them so that when we actually enter the battle, we're in a really vulnerable state because these soldiers are so young. So it ended up being a blessing. But I will say this piece, because it's such a big piece, it took me 14 goes to get right.
That is epic. It's amazing. I can see how that would have taken a long time to craft, because it's beautifully crafted and how it builds. Very emotional, very tense. Yeah, incredible way to set the scene for the film that I have not seen.
It had to be one of those things as well where every idea that's in the entire film had to be seated in that opening. So it was the first thing I started writing when I wrote the film. And I kept writing through the reels and having to keep coming back to this piece. It's one of the reasons why it took 14 goes to do, because I kept having to put new things into it. And, because it had to be that every idea was there in that front opening piece that then plays out through the whole battle. It was like a mini battle at the front.
So do you mean every musical theme from the rest of the film had to be? So did you write the rest of it first, or did you write that and then, as you're saying, keep revising it?
Yeah, I kept having to revise it and go back and forth as I did it, and then sort of finished it finally when I finished the final reel sort of thing.
So do you normally write chronologically?
I do. How about you?
Yeah, I do. I'm wondering, hearing that, with that whether I wouldn't have written the rest and then gone to the first one, but maybe because I'm slack. Maybe because I wouldn't have wanted to do it 14 times. I don't know, but normally I can't resist the temptation to score chronologically. Yeah. Well, I really, really need to see the rest of that.
Yeah, it's actually a great film, and it really does throw you right into the battle and give you an inside perspective on the survival element of war. And that was definitely one thing. Creve was really going, I want you to score this film. And I was like, I refuse to make the Vietnamese the enemies. Everyone are victims in this war. If you want me to score this film, I'm not making those Vietnamese people the enemies. Everyone is going to be a victim. This is a survival film. He's like, no, I really want you to score this film.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting point, isn't it? The sort of influence that film and, well, any screen music can have subliminally. You certainly touched on that with New Gold Mountain and sort of swapping the musical perspective. And there's all sorts of things that you can do, like the really boring way to approach film, or I keep saying film, it's really not the way it is anymore. Screen composition these days is, the boring way to do it is just to reinforce what's going on in front of you, isn't it? I mean, that's pretty dull. Sometimes you are forced to do that, but I certainly have much more fun when you're playing with many layers of meaning. And if you're lucky, the music can be talking about a layer of meaning which may not even be stated out loud.
Yep.
In the film anywhere. Like perhaps that idea, I haven't seen the film, but perhaps that idea you're talking about isn't expressly stated. Perhaps there's no expositional dialogue where a character says, we're all victims in this war.
There is definitely no exposition.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen, yes.
Yeah. So that's when it gets really interesting, when you can kind of play with the philosophy or a series of ideas or intentions that are subtext rather than text. That's when I think scoring for screen can become very meaningful.
So do you have a clip you want to play too, Bryony?
I do. Well, actually, it does tie in quite nicely to what we were talking about before, saying how I like to, these days, I like to try my hand at lots of different styles, and talking about how Josh Thomas loves to play. So given that I've just finished Everything's Going to Be Okay and it's very fresh in my mind, I think, not even sure if it's all aired. They were chasing us. So, we were doing a 2-week turnaround for 2 eps, 10 eps in the series. So every 2 weeks you get a briefing, then 2 weeks later a mix, a sound mix, and then going on. So I think that the screenings were chasing us by, like, they're about 2 behind. So you wouldn't want to break your arm.
No, shh, don't say things like that.
Yeah, so I have 3 clips which I think is worth playing concurrently, just to show the different styles that we traverse. In fact, to be honest, I could have, if I'd wanted it to be all about me, Caitlin, I could have picked a lot more, because in this second series, musically, we just bounced around so much stylistically. But I just picked 2 a couple of clips from, I think, adjacent episodes. I think it's about Ep 7 and Ep 8 of this show, and you see the musical and stylistic changes.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
You've entered an interactive space with yourself. Please turn off your phones, find yourself, and be honest for once. You will each have 60 seconds.
Who should go first?
Absolutely you.
True art is authentic. It comes from a real place, deep down in your soul. Without that authenticity, true art is meaningless, devoid of meaning. What the hell am I even saying? Does any of that make any sense? Like, did it have any real meaning? I prepared this speech about authenticity and its place in art. And I'm just now realizing the inherent irony in that. You can't prepare to be authentic. I mean, I was giving this rehearsed speech, just pretending that it was all coming to me on the fly, like about authenticity. Can you think of anything less authentic than that? Like, I'm literally cringing at the person I was 20 seconds ago. Like that guy just didn't get it. He was just stating his wants, his needs, his desires, and come on, let's be honest with ourselves. We all just want something so basic. So why do we go to these great lengths to achieve it?
Time's up. Your turn now.
You could say things if you'd like.
The ritual of asking a father's permission? It really isn't necessary. Is Nicholas okay with this?
He drove me here. So, is that a yes? I actually can't think about it anymore.
What'll you think about instead?
I don't know.
You're lying. You got something.
I
Give it to me. What do you got? Why don't we think about chocolate babka?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay, yeah.
Oh!
Nicholas,
Hi.
I was telling Matilda it's not a tradition I agree with, but you know what? She's my daughter, and I'll cry if I want to. Congratulations!
Thank you.
Bye-bye!
Okay. Seatbelts. Good. Okay. I just really thought he was gonna say no.
I brought Lamingtons.
Oh, okay.
Okay. This is what's gonna happen.
They're so fun. Like, you're having such a good time writing music for that show.
Just so that's kind of, yeah, I don't have any big big point to make other than it's so fun. It's just, you're just bouncing around. It's fun, but it's also like he almost killed me. So in the first, in those first two, which obviously from the same episode, the teenagers have a first date, and he decides, a COVID date, he decides to take her into this mirrors art installation. So then Josh says, right, we'll score it with a string quartet and a low deep voice and a boy child, and there's five cues that are in the maze. They're like several minutes long. You're writing kind of proper string quartet music to the same schedule that you're normally writing music, like the second piece, as you can hear. I write it all at home, and then I write it for a band. So I play on my piano parts and I take them into the studio so they've got something to play with. And then I score the trumpet part, and I kind of score the vocal part, but she does it by ear. And the rest of it I do as chord charts, so it's much quicker, like so the majority of this music is done for a band. We have a house band, and we have a very big shorthand, and then all of a sudden in the middle of the 2-week per hour turnaround from go to woe, you're thrown 5 cues for string quartet and baritone it was, and what he called boy child, which is actually my younger son singing there. So yeah, so it's super fun, but it's also quite a lot to do in the time,
in a short amount of time, and to record it and mix it and to score it. And did you use your Logic sheet music again for that one?
Well, I had to. I tried to get my mate Amelia to be copyist for me for that, but in which case it would have been exported into Finale. She uses, but it was Easter, and like a normal person, she was going away. She was going camping, so I actually had to do it. Yeah, I had to do it myself, and I did do it in Logic.
I think what's wonderful about all of those scenes is clearly Josh is brave as a director and happy for you to play and happy for you to be bold and different with the music. So it does invite you to listen. It does make itself known. And I know that there's a big thing around underscore, and it's underscoring the drama and hanging around underneath. But I often think that, music, that's kind of sort of like sometimes a missed opportunity for the poetry that music can bring to a scene. It's nice when a director does have the confidence to really make a splash with the music as well.
It totally seems like he's the director, but just for the director's sake. So Josh is the showrunner, and then there actually were two. No. I actually, it's as you probably know, it seems quite different in America. So the directors were Rachel and Silas, but in 2 series I haven't actually had a conversation with them or an email or anything. Yeah. So they're directing on set, then they do their cut, but then Josh takes over because he's the showrunner. So yeah, I'm just saying that because to give them credit where credit's due.
And that is the showrunner model, actually. That's how it works, yeah.
Exactly. So yes, I mean, sometimes with him we do very, very, very subtle music as well. Sometimes he wants it to be so soft that, it's like super, super soft. But yes, when it's there, it's really, really there. I don't mind. I love stuff with no music, and I don't mind. I don't know what you think, but, it's a kind of a vexed issue, mixing, not music mixing, the overall sound mixing, in terms of where the music should sit with all the sound design. I mean, my personal opinion is if I have written a score that is dynamically loud, I'd like to hear it loud, and if possible within the broader scheme of things. And if I've written one that's soft, I'm quite often asking for it to be turned down. I often find them too loud. Like I actually want it to be dynamically soft. What about you?
Well, it's interesting you say that because there was this cue in New Gold Mountain that they were playing excruciatingly loud, and it was a big cue, and I said, you know what? This actually is already sounding big. I don't think we need to play it this loud. So I do think there's a threshold. I think that the way that music sits in a mix is, you know, there's a gazillion different reasons why it might be turned up or down. And it also may depend on whether we've got sound design or whether they're just focusing on music or sound design or what the lead is in the time. But I also think that there's a, you know, different countries tend to have different tendencies toward whether it's loud or soft. And I think generally if I watch TV shows from America, it's pretty there. It's really, it's up there and it's doing its job, which is fantastic.
Music and dialogue, right?
Music and dialogue. Yeah, you watch shows from England and you're like, wow, that music is so soft. Like, you know, like sometimes, you know, The Crown, for example, it's really soft. And you're
what
like,
do you think about here?
Here, I think it can go either way. I really do think it can go either way. For some reason, doco, it's always quite loud. Maybe it's just the doco makers I'm working with. It's loud in New Gold Mountain. So, yeah, it can go
Good. I can't wait to hear it.
But I've done feature films before where it's just become so punishingly soft that it's like, oh, God, all that work and all that beautiful recording, it's just, we just can't hear it.
It's sometimes I wonder, I certainly don't always want stuff to be loud. I'm like far from it. But sometimes when I'm surprised that something's not as loud as I expect to be, I kind of think, you know, when we're doing our final mixes, music mixes, we often, depending, especially as the day goes on, we monitor louder and louder. And, you know, we're listening at such, you know, loud volume really a lot of the time that I think I might get used to that. And then sometimes when I go into a mix, think, oh, that I was expecting sort of this and I'm getting this, but maybe that's okay.
So when you send over, like, you know, whips or review versions of your shows, do you do a quick mix of the music into the review version?
Yes, I do. Absolutely, I do. Yep. Do you?
I mean, it's really, I find this is, there's always like, there's never a right answer to this. Yeah. But I always like, sometimes I'm like, okay, everyone, you're getting it really loud so you can hear what you've got. And it's nice for them to get used to it sitting in the mix loud. But other times that's really backfired on me because it's so loud that they're just all overwhelmed and that everything just gets pushed down.
It's really funny you say that today because literally 10 minutes before we hopped on, I sent my first batch of drafts for Frayed for the first episode off to the director, and I had made them loud. And I said to him, these are too loud so that you can hear everything, but do let me know if you want me to remix them and turn them all down before we send them out to everyone else who has to approve them. So I am so in agreement with you. And then with Everything's Going to Be Okay, actually have to say the Americans were unbelievably good to work with, and they were in the first series too. I'm getting, because the deadline's so tight and there's so much music, it's getting 24-hour turnarounds from all the executives in notes. I mean, that you can't ask for better than that. Aided by the time zone difference, but still, like, that's just brilliant. And I got in 10 episodes, I got 3 cues that they wanted changed, and I listened to how I supplied them those cues, and I thought, especially with, as I was just explaining to you earlier, the change that happens from my draft to final product, I thought, I put that way too loud. So it was like total user error on my part. And after that, I sent them all the rest of my stuff quite low. And because it is a shock for them, I think, when they're used to hearing a temp in there at a certain volume, and they're used to the temp anyway, they probably watch a lot of times. And then, and I had just done it, I just got a bit excited and just left it too loud. So it's a really, it's a very pertinent thing to talk about, I think. I would probably err on the side of caution most of the time, but I didn't today. How does it go? It must be different with everyone you collaborate with.
It is different.
How do you work out who does what, and how does it work?
Well, after this, I go onto a show with Basil Hodgios, who's someone else I've collaborated with a lot as well. And I do love collaborating when it works well. And it really depends on the show. I mean, I will say at the end of the day, I find I still prefer to work as the only composer on a show because it's just easier and more expedient to have, an autonomous tone for the show. And particularly my process, because I write chronologically and every day I sit down and I watch from beginning to wherever I'm up to at the beginning of the day. And that really puts me in the seat of the viewer. And then I kind of take my viewer hat off and I put my composer hat on. So when I'm writing with another composer, if we're dividing up cues, it can be tricky because there's holes in it and I'm not sure where we're going. But sometimes it's just necessity because of, a time frame or budget, or we've got something else on. And, it's been very successful in the past with certain people that I've worked with. So that's been really good. But I do prefer not to collaborate. I prefer doing it on my own still.
I'm wondering how you do establish tone. If that's just something that sort of organically you do bounce ideas, you write things, show them to each other, and
every person I've worked with in the past and collaborated with in the past is different. With Amanda, we sit down and we just talk about what palette we're going to use, and we kind of curate our palette. We sort of go, have you got those samples? I've got those samples. Yeah, let's use those. Sometimes with Andrew, I will write down my themes. I always write my themes down on manuscript first before I do anything, and they sit handwritten versions of all my themes for all my shows, whatever I'm working with, always sit on my desk because I'm writing. So they're just always there in their kind of most basic forms. So I might send those over to Andrew. I've done the same with Basil, where we share our themes, we write it out for each other or whatever it is, and we kind of, share stems and share, recorded textures and things like that. What I generally do with Basil is we usually have this folder called fodder, and it's just all the stuff that we throw into it and stems and stuff. So we just share. So yeah, everyone's different in the way we do it. But generally, I mean, the practicalities of it is you have to divide the cues and you take certain ones each. In the past, there was a composer I worked with called Jonathan Dower, a very talented guy. He could play anything, that guy. But we worked in the room together and we wrote together in the room on all of that, which was great fun. But that was different. That was us kind of writing in the room together.
They all sound really interesting ways to do it, and the fodder. I can imagine the fodder working practically as well. Because I guess one of the things I wondered about it is that one of the main reasons to do it, other than the creative stimulation of working with someone else in that way, is to save time. And I always wondered whether the toing and froing would create more jobs to do and take up a lot of time. But I guess if you got really used to it.
Depends on the person you're working with. Sometimes it can take a lot longer because everything gets discussed, and that makes everything take, like getting half the fee and you're doing half the music, but it's taking 4 times as long. So
that's always worried me a bit. I find it more exhausting talking about doing something than doing it. I find it quite draining to discuss what you're going to do. I'm much happier just sitting down and doing it. Which makes me terrible. That's why I work by myself. A sort of control freak maybe, but also not even a very good delegator. And I don't work by myself. I have a team of people that I work with every time I work. The same sound engineer, Rodney Lowe, I've worked with for 20 years, and I always work with Amelia Barden as a copyist, and all sorts of people, Brett Kelly as a conductor, but in different roles.
Yes. Yeah.
In different roles.
Yes, I love working that way myself. I do have a team of people that I work with that way as well, and I do love it.
I'm sure.
Bryony, spreadsheets.
Spreadsheet. I bet. I don't know about how to do spreadsheets. I know I have to open them up for cue sheets, but I don't even know how to create one, Caitlin.
Okay, well, my spreadsheet thing is absolutely insane.
Wow.
And every cue is logged, every piece of feedback is logged. Yeah. And every instrument that I'm writing for that needs to be recorded is logged. And whether I've bounced out MIDI, clicks, stems, it's all logged. Everything is logged. Mix reviews logged. It's insane, spreadsheet land. No.
This is my version of that. That's my that's my version of logging.
That's amazing. Isn't that so different?
That is incredible. That's just my cue notes. That's incredible. So that's not contingent on whether you're working solo or with someone else. That's how you work.
It's how I work.
That's how you can work with someone else, you see, because your sister, you've externalized. That's amazing. That's incredible.
Yeah, so I don't often I'll put feedback on a spreadsheet.
Like that?
Can you see that? So it's got time code, cue name, file name, theme. And then I'm trying to, it's just zoom it over. It has what I'm recording.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, hang on. I do.
It's all in it. Yeah, you do that. See?
I do.
Other stems. If I also go in here, all my spot notes are in there.
Ah, brilliant.
And the edits, and then the feedback, when I got the feedback through, whether I've done it, all that kind of stuff.
That's just a recent one.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Yeah. So it's not crazy dissimilar. So I have my notes about, this is just for recording notes, quick starts, titles, who's playing, what's playing. So I do stuff like
You do it,
but not perhaps quite as thoroughly, and not in the same way through the whole process. That is formidable.
It just means it, and I share that with everyone on my team at the beginning. So my assistant can see it. The Sean Carey, who is mixing on New Gold Mountain, could see it, and they could see where we're at and all that kind of stuff.
So do you have a permanent assistant?
It's pretty much Andrew Scott, yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Yep.
And when he's not co-writing with you, what sort of stuff does he do for you?
Everything. So he does session setup. He does he does scores. He does just everything an assistant would do. He doesn't do coffee or anything like that. I would never, ever, ever, ever make him go get me coffee or anything like that. I pay him by the hour and I give him decent work, But it's always, if it's a show that we're reusing cues on the other side, it might be cutting stems into picture, anything. But mostly it's pulling together sessions, it's sending things off, it's, reconforming cuts to new pieces of music or whatever it might be, or music to new cuts, scores, turning up to the sessions, score notes. On New Gold Mountain, they needed a string arrangement for another song. I couldn't do it because I was just too busy writing. So Andrew did that, those kinds of things.
That's really fascinating to me. I don't, I have this incredible team, but I don't have someone doing that. I do all that myself, which is, I do all of it. Yeah. Which is it's quite, when you say it, I'm kind of that's quite a lot to be, and quite often, like you, working on multiple projects at once and pretty much doing all that stuff. And so he doesn't work in the same place as you anymore either.
No, he used to, but he doesn't. He works down like a suburb and a half away.
Yeah.
If you could change something about our craft or our industry, what would you change? Or do you think there is something to change or nothing to change?
It's a great question. I've never been asked that. Would perhaps change the quick turnarounds in TV, but I don't mind them. I don't mind them. I'm used to them, really used to them, and I am fast, and I don't mind working fast. So I think I probably get off on the adrenaline of it, really. So that's fine for me. I mean, I would change, representation in who makes up composers. I, wish there was a more diverse pool of composers, more women, which is happening, isn't it? There are more women, I think. So that's happening, and that's awesome. And lots of sort of different people having more access to our industry, probably. That's otherwise, I like in terms of the actual job that we do. I like it.
Yeah, that's cool.
What about you?
I like it too. I mean, I love the job. I find it crazily addictive, and I always say that I have an illogical obsession with being a screen composer. And it's illogical because really at the end of the day, you work your butt off crazy hours on these extraordinarily high stress turnarounds for something that's not, as you say, brain surgery. But I do feel like it does have the potential to make a difference in this world, and that's what motivates me every time. I always want to take on jobs that make a difference somehow. I would definitely at least change the ability to make the schedule and the budget fit the artistic needs of the show. Often it goes the other way around, or there's a little bit of a tension between which you have to service. And I would like to see, shows be more servicing the artistic, needs of the show via the budget and the schedule, so that potentially it could open up more possibilities. That said, I do love part of the puzzle for me, solving nature of it, is what can I do with the budget I have in the time I have to make it just as high quality as I possibly can and as creative as I can. So there is something incredibly, alluring about those restrictions as well.
There really is, isn't there? I mean, it would be great to have more money, but I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, sometimes you come up with the most unusual combination of instruments because, whoever wants a symphony orchestra, and you say, well, unless you've got, $60,000 per whatever, 2 EPs or whatever, just for the orchestra, you're not going to get them. So, and then you come up with something very idiosyncratic, and I think Australians are particularly good at that because we've had to be. We're resourceful, and that out of that can come some really interesting creative decisions. And I love that.
I think these barriers are often the things. I've reflected upon this a lot because, like you, I came into this industry and had a baby straight away. And, my kid is 1 year younger than the length of time I've been in this industry, sort of thing. So it's like...
Same.
I do think, that these barriers that I had actually make the composer that I am today, such as I spent the first 12 years of my career writing in a tiny room in a basement with looking after my kid at the same time and doing things like writing in those small windows of his naps or, the short school day and all that kind of stuff. So that really taught me to write quickly. And because I spent so much time in doco with small ensembles, I've learnt to make a small ensemble sound large, just not by double tracking, although yes, you can double track and triple track and all that kind of stuff, but using voicings and harmony, weirdly, rather than using, multiple layers. And so those particular wide voicings that I have an absolute obsession with in my work are actually a big part of my own sound and my musical fingerprint. So I do think that these barriers are actually the things that make us carve our own way because we have to dig around them,
Yeah.
And that's, that's what makes us who we are.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. I mean, and, that doesn't mean, obviously, we're not suggesting that people shouldn't be paid properly for their work or, not suggesting that at all, but just that there are ways around restrictions.
Yep, exactly. Thanks for the chat. I think we spoke about nice things,
I found what you were saying fascinating. wonder if I could ever have an assistant, Caitlin, when I grow
I
up.
wish one for you.